For Reaper Metal Productions, I am Adam of Unbaptized Records, making a brand new video for you today. Today is my part 5, my part 6-part series going through my horror movie collection. So today I have some DVDs here. I've mentioned before in previous videos, so if you don't remember, if you haven't seen them, the collections that I have are mostly Blu-rays because my DVDs, for the most part, what I do is I buy the DVDs and recycle the boxes because a lot of them nowadays just come with no insert and just a recycled box and an outside. So I don't really feel like keeping them. And what I do is I just take the DVD, put them in a binder so that they're all put away, and it just saves me space, and I recycle the boxes. So there's definitely a decent amount of movies that fit in the horror genre that I'm not going to show off, and maybe I'll mention them in other videos at some point, but I'm not going to show them off because, again, I'm not going to hold a binder and just show you a bunch of DVDs and storage like that. So I have a couple other movies, but these are the ones where I kept the boxes for them. This is going to be a fairly eclectic group of movies. So a lot of movies that are either really goofy and weird over the top, or movies that are considered sort of classic, cult classic, and then just sort of odd movies that I've discovered because of people like the Angry Video Game Nerd or the guys from Red Letter Media, especially this first one. The first one and the third one I know I've definitely discovered because of them. And the second one was from the Angry Video Game Nerd. So if you don't know, Red Letter Media talks about movies that are so bad that they're kind of good. And that's kind of where we start off with John Micklethor in Rock and Roll Nightmare. And this also fits the metal motif because it is I don't know if he's actually in a real band. Maybe he's in the band Thor. I'm not positive because I never listened to them. But even if he's not in a band, he definitely looks like the quintessential, 80s heavy metal rocker, whatever. Basically, it's a really, really goofy movie that I came across because of Red Letter Media that was so kind of bad it was good, where a group of band members and their girlfriends or groupies, because I think some of the band members are women, so, girl band members obviously have their boyfriends and male band members have their girlfriends with them, but they go to the studio to record. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere. It's going to give them a great space away from people to be creative and record their music and write their music. And they start coming across demons. And there's a twist ending at the end. And it's very goofy and silly and over the top. But clearly, this was a passion project by this guy here, whose name is John Micklethor. So if you don't believe me, there it is. I think he's in one other movie where he's a zombie. And that movie isn't much better. But this one is great. It's one of those so bad it's good. It's a lot like the movie Black Roses, if you're familiar with it. It's the heavy metal, just silly, goofy horror movie of the 80s. And there were a couple of these, and this is definitely one of the ones that, if you haven't heard of it and you're into that kind of movie, check this out. It's definitely worth watching. Super goofy, over the top. Next is a bit more serious movie, but yeah, when I watched it, definitely wasn't that creepy, although I feel like it tries to be. But it's still a pretty decent movie, and it's an alien takeover movie called The Deadly Spawn. So I have this creature here, comes into people's houses, kills them all. Really not much more to say about it. I don't think any of the actors in this movie were ones I even recognized, but essentially the tie-in, really for anything that'd be interesting, the reason I know about it, again, the Angry Video Game Nerd, who some of you hopefully do know, talked about this in one of his series. He does a series every year going through horror movies called Monster Madness. And it was kind of cool because, at least in this movie, the kid is the hero because he's a big fan of horror movies and no one really takes his interest seriously. But because he knows so much about horror movies, he's able to save members of his family because of his knowledge. So that's kind of cool. That's really the only interesting theme, I guess, to this. I definitely recommend watching it, but it's definitely not my favorite. I was a little disappointed. So if you've watched hundreds of horror movies and somehow you haven't come across this yet, throw it on the list, but it's definitely lower on my list. I didn't really care for it that much. But I watched it anyways and still glad I own it. Now this movie is probably one of the dumbest movies I've ever seen, but I knew it was dumb, which is the reason I got it. And the only way I could describe it is it's sort of like if Tremors was really, really bad and stupid, and instead of monsters, they were rabbits. And that is called Night of the Lepus, or Lepus. So that's the Latin name for I guess like rabbits, like their kingdom or species or something. But it's pretty much the dumbest movie I've ever seen. But I specifically bought it because I knew it was going to be bad. Again, this was a red letter medium movie, so if you're familiar with the movies they review, it shouldn't be surprising. But they have a lot of shots, miniature shots of rabbits just kind of running over little miniature houses and destroying them. And then occasionally they have people getting attacked by people in rabbit suits. I thought it was hilarious. So I thought it was worth grabbing. And then the way that they kill the rabbits at the end is super goofy too. But it's just so bad that it's good. Again, theme of some of these movies here. So take that as you will, and I would proceed with caution if you bother watching that movie because you really have to have a lot of good movies under your belt and even a lot of bad movies under your belt to tolerate that. So, but this is going to be a quick pivot here to what's considered a classic, and it's a very artistic movie. It comes from Japan, I believe. It was from the late 70s, and it's a movie I feel like a lot of people should probably be familiar with, or at least know some of the memes from it, like know the cat, or maybe know the cover. That's the movie House. So this is like a coming of age movie. A young girl who brings all her friends to her aunt's house, and each of the friends have unique names. It kind of gives away some of the story. Like each character is sort of like a different personality. So one of them knows martial arts, and the other one knows how to cook, and the other one knows how to play an instrument. So, and then their name, like the lady who plays the instrument, is named Melody. So clearly, it seems to be kind of like an amalgamation of the one girl, and they're all her personalities, and they all start things start happening to her in this haunted house where her aunt lives. And then there's the cat that brings them all in, and it's just one of those movies where you have to interpret it. But it's considered a classic movie. It's really, really well shot for back in that era because it just doesn't feel like a movie you've probably ever seen. The special effects are pretty unique, especially given it came out in 1977, especially because it's from Japan. So not a lot of movies in the world come out of places other than usually the US, because that's Hollywood, India, which is Bollywood, which is the second largest producer of movies. I believe maybe South Korea is the third. So to see a movie, an older movie out of Japan, I mean, I know they have obviously Studio Toho, which did the Godzilla movies back all the way in the 50s. So they do have studios, but a movie of this caliber, super artistic, very psychedelic, very of the era, and just really interesting and unique, not necessarily scary. But if you want a movie that's very trippy and you haven't already seen this, definitely recommend checking it out. Go into it blind. That is the one thing I will say. You can research any of these other movies. I kind of did with this. Go into this movie not knowing anything other than what I told you. That's the best way to watch it. And if you have seen it, I'd be curious to see what people think the interpretation of the movie is. I don't kind of want to spoil it. Not that it really matters, but let me know what you think of the movie. And then next we have a collection here. And you can tell I haven't opened it yet, but I have seen the first two of these. That's why I really wanted to own this, and it was nice and cheap. But that is the Poltergeist collection. So I have seen the first two. They're great movies. They're classics. I mean, they're Spielberg movies that I think he actually did pretty well with. They're not super scary, of course, but they're just very well done and very enjoyable. And they're classics. Don't really need to say much about them. It's Poltergeist. I think anyone could easily recognize it just by the girl in front of the static TV. So definitely watch it if you haven't already. But again, doesn't really need much description or introduction. And last but not least is part of the reason I was mentioning I haven't gotten to some of these movies, because I have collections like this that are over the top with 12 movies in them, and they are very goofy, but there's more to the series which I will probably never watch because I just don't have the time or energy, and they go super downhill after like the first three, and really they're not much to begin with, but they're still fun and campy. And these are the Puppet Master movies. So Charles Band is the master of just cranking out movies. And in the 80s and 90s, he actually did some much more formidable movies. They were just, they were just better. He actually had somewhat of a studio. And then as time went on, they got really bad, and he would license out things like these characters and demonic toys and other things. And actually, there was a crossover with demonic toys and Puppet Master. So all these puppets, it just got really crazy and dumb, and it wasn't as good anymore. And again, he kind of took his name off of them. But if you're unfamiliar, Full Moon Productions, that's his studio. If you're really not into the horrible, just what am I watching? Some of the worst movies I've ever seen, which some of his are. So, for example, the movie The Ginger Dead Man with Gary Busey, it's just so dumb. But they made two more of them. The first one was at least okay. It was kind of campy, but it was bad. The second one was so bad, I actually literally threw it away. I'm like, I don't even want someone to pick this up in a thrift shop. But these aren't that bad. Again, his movies from at least the 80s and 90s are decent. And if you only watch anything, just watch the first Puppet Master. It's pretty cool. I like the puppets. I like the characters. I'd say watch up to the first three. But I have all of these. I think I've seen the first five. I don't know if I've seen six. And I haven't seen the Killjoys yet. But he did movies like, Evil Bong and just some really, really stupid crap that he just churns out. But definitely at least watch the first one. But this was like $10. So, but that's all I have for now. And I'll see you in the next video.